a scroll being rolled up. What's going on elsewhere in the Bible? Joel, Isaiah, Hosea, even Luke gets in on it. Whenever there's darkness and earthquakes and rumblings and things are turned upside down and things are yanked out of the sea and things are rolled up like scrolls, their whole world is turning upside down, right? It's some form of judgment. So why not? Let's look at Isaiah chapter 13 together. Isaiah chapter 13. And keep your finger in Isaiah. We'll look at another reference to Isaiah shortly here. Isaiah chapter 13, what's your header say for this section of Isaiah? We have those little man-made headers that come before each section. What's yours say? So guess what we're going to read about here, right? I'm going to look especially around verse 10. So we'll just read that section. How about, we'll start at 9. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel and with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation and to destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be dark at its rising. The moon will not shed its light. I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pomp and arrogant and lay low the pompous pride of the ruthless. I will make more rare than fine gold and mankind than gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will be shaken out of its place at the wrath of the Lord of hosts in the day of his fierce anger. And like a hunted gazelle or sheep with none to gather them, each will turn to his own people, and each will flee to his own land. Whoever is found will be thrust through, and whoever is caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed into pieces before their eyes. Their house will be plundered, and their wives ravished. Behold, I am stirring up the Medes against them. Right? This horrible picture of the atrocities that are going to befall them. We get some specific stuff here, is talking about Babylon, talking about even their babies will not survive this. Whenever the Medes come in to attack them, they're not going to leave anybody left, right? They're going to utterly destroy them. But we read this same, the moon and the sun are darkened, the earth trembles, the heavens rumble, right? The same thing. I'll say, if you look at Joel, Isaiah, Hosea, even Luke 23 gets in on this exact same thing. The darkening and the earthquake. It's a judgment, right? So, it could be like a literal warning of, this would be around the time Pompeii and that kind of stuff would happen. I don't think that's what's going on here. You'd be kind of hard-pressed to make that your only argument. But this is a judgment, right? Because what do we just read about? The fifth seal. What's going on with the fifth seal? The martyrs, and they're begging for vengeance, right? And they're told just a little while longer. And we open the sixth seal, and we have this symbol, this image of judgment being poured out, right? So the answer to the fifth seal is here. And this is most likely an answer, or at least a promise to them of the judgment that will come to their question. The stars, the figs, and the heavens, please don't get tied up in trying to figure out what all this means. Those little figs, it's made, the word here, it says that the fig tree drops them, their winter fruit. It's a weird kind of fig that like never matures anything, and so they fall off in the winter. Like this type of fig tree never produces any figs that is referencing here. Apparently it's a real thing. But don't try to get hung up trying to figure out what each one of these pieces mean. It's just the storm, this tumult is coming to the earth. Everything's going to be turned upside down. With the fall of the Roman Empire, it is, right? When the Roman Empire falls, everything is turned upside down. That's the whole world right there. They were the world power. So if the strongest power in the whole world is upheaved and turned upside down, then the whole world is. All trade, all economies, safety and security, the law of the land that was keeping you safe is now gone. Everything. And it doesn't matter, because once the empire falls, it will affect everyone. Honestly, it'll affect the rich and the pompous more than it will the poor and the slave, right? Because the rich and the pompous have more to lose. The guys who are poor, think back to our Great Depression, Dust Bowl era, interviewed my grandmother, who was born in 1924 and just passed this year. I sat down and interviewed her a couple of years back. I was just like, can we just talk? Right? Like this, I just want to know. You've seen so much of this nation. And I said, growing up, you grew up right there. I mean, that's the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl era, all of those things. And then World War II, you're old enough to be dating and stuff through, right? And so I was like, what was the Great Depression like? She's like, I don't know. I was a poor farmer. I didn't know I was poor, but I knew we were farmers. Didn't matter to us. We just grew stuff. We canned stuff. We made our own clothes. That's what we'd always done. That's what we always did, right? It doesn't affect the poor like it does the rich. So the rulers now have nothing to rule over. They can't maintain control. They don't have anything to rule over. The rich have lost everything because who cares about what they have? There's no one to keep them secure either. So if someone wants to come take it from them, right? So that's why it's talking about even those more powerful people will be, everything's turned upside down. Everything will be shaken. A great storm's coming, earthquakes, these emblems of judgment. So the Lord is demonstrating his superior power. Nobody's exempt. Nobody can hide. And the question raised is then, who will be able to stand? It's the same question that we read in Isaiah chapter 13. Who will be able to stand? And then we open the door for our next scene, or we're setting the stage for the next scene we're about to have. Now let's stop and draw some parallels here. The Roman Empire, it's kind of hard to peg about how long it lasted because how do you set your terms, right? I mean, from the foundation of Rome, from the first time they took over somebody else and became a true empire, from the first Caesar, like how are you clocking it, right? But we're going to use, if we found from the city of Rome being founded was about 800 BC, and then the true fall of the Roman Empire, when it's just in shambles, is about 500 AD. So from 800 to 500, that's about 1,300 years, right? So the Revelation is given John around, give or take, 90 AD. Okay, so from 90, roughly 100 AD to around 500, is about 400 years remain, right? So before the judgment is completely done and Rome is truly in just total shambles, it's about 400 years. Who else can we think of in the Bible that an empire fell and it was about 400 years worth of waiting from the time the prayers, the incense, as we read, the prayers are called incense in Revelation. From the time the prayers started going up until the time of the deliverance, about 400 years, right? Egypt, you're right. What happened with Egypt? We had these plagues come upon the land. Judgment was promised. There was darkness. There was blood in the water. And now we understand that Egypt was these plagues literally happened. Locusts actually came. There was water literally turned to blood. Those were literal plagues, right? These promised things are being spoken. Remember, this is code. This is a painting of an image. So these literal things are not going to happen to Rome, but we understand that the same calamities, their great calamity is promised upon your empire, such calamity that you will not survive, right? So it's interesting that there are times in the Roman Empire when persecution waxes and wanes, but until the empire's in shambles, it persists. I mean, we get Constantine finally from Nero, which is like 50 or 60, I think it is AD, all the way through Constantine. Constantine finally makes it the state religion, and then not too long after that, it just falls apart, right? And it's interesting to me that some historians actually credit Christianity with crumbling the fall of the Roman Empire. Well, isn't that ironic? So accepting Christianity broke the empire. That's what God promised was going to happen, right? It's like that little final nail on the coffin. Got it. And that's secular historians. I'm not talking about Bible historians, like secular historians that don't like God and Christendom stuff, right? Our favorite people, our biggest fans. They think that Christians broke the Roman Empire. And honestly, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Firstly, because it was promised. Christians are promised victory before the fall, so obviously. But the ideals of Christendom cannot survive in an empire like the Roman Empire. It's literally centered around sin. As we go and we read about the beast and we read about the smaller beast, and it becomes apparent. And what's going on is how corrupt the Roman Empire was and where their power was truly derived from, and how much control was allowed by Satan in this place. It could not survive if Christendom was going to survive in here. So the secular historians are probably right. We've already pointed out the Israelites were the ones who were in servitude for about 400 years, and Christians here have about 400 years left of persecution. What did the 400 years of persecution do for the Israelites in Egypt? Became a nation. It made them, somebody over here just said it, it made them stronger, right? You don't want a bunch of wimpy folks running around through the wilderness and trying to make it and go conquer other lands. Granted, God promised them those foreign lands and he delivered it to them, but you're going to have to make this long trek with all of your stuff. Your faith is going to be tested. And how long did it take the Israelites, even after 400 years of persecution, how far had the Israelites made it before, like, we should have stayed in Egypt. It's hot out here. They hadn't even made it to the Red Sea. They barely made it out of the country. And they're like, they should have stayed. It's been 400 years. Everything was horrible there, but at least we had water.
Well, as I said, if God bring us into the desert to watch us perish, we could have done it just as well back there.
Mm-hmm. And then what did we read when we were studying the bread of life, or was life? I think it was life was more than food. We were studying that last Sunday night, right? And they were like, in Egypt we had all these fresh fruits and vegetables. We had leeks and onions, and we had fish, and we had all these wonderful things in Egypt. They were still in the wilderness when they said that. So can you imagine if they hadn't had 400 years of persecution and God had just done like Abraham, like, hey man, why don't we just go? What the Israelites would have done. So this 400 years was a period of preparation. There's an R in there. Preparation, strengthening, trials for the Egyptians, right? Christians have about 400 years left of persecution. Whenever the Roman Empire falls, what do Christians need to do? What should they have been doing the whole time because they were been told to go do? Spread the word. That's the parable of the sower, right? Go sow the seed. And this is not the first time God has used persecution to aid in the spreading of the seed, right? They need endurance for the trip. They need strength for military might when they get done, and they shouldn't take God's deliverance for granted. That's what we're talking about, the parallels with the Israelites. When the Israelites left Egypt, what was left of the greatest superpower in the whole world?
It was in shambles. It was completely destroyed. Their military.
Yeah, the military's gone. How much of their crops do they have left? No, because how many plagues had taken out the crops?
Well,
Locusts. So locusts and hail are specifically mentioned at two different times of year as specifically taking out the two different times of years that you would grow crops. I mean, they literally have no crops. All their animals are dead. Remember the boils and the hail once again. The firstborn, once again, the animals. So they have no food. They have no economy. They've given all their riches to the Israelites to leave. Like, no, please leave. Right? They actually gave them their jewels and their gems to leave. So they don't have any money. They don't have any military. They don't have any food. They have nothing. And that's the promised calamities that were going to fall upon them. When God takes you out, he takes you out right. And it's the exact same thing we're reading here. The military is crushed. The crops and cattle are gone. Economic ruin. Wait a minute. What were we just reading about is going to promise to the Roman Empire as they fall? Right? God's got a pattern that works really well for taking out his enemies. Extremely similar situation with the Roman Empire as Egypt was. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think God is preparing Christians just like he was preparing the Israelites. Thoughts thus far on the seals, because we're about to hit this weird interim between the 6th and 7th seal. So before we dig into this, any thoughts on the seals or anything thus far? Take that as a no. Let's get into chapter 7. I'll need to be back up later. Thus begins the confusion of a lot of our denominational friends here. Let's read through. Chapter 7, verse 1. After this, the 7 seals have been opened. Jesus has come up, grabbed the scroll, broken all 7 seals. We've seen what he saw as each seal is opened and the scroll is unrolled, right? After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, that no wind might blow on the earth or sea against any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, with the seal of the living God. And he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to harm the earth and sea, saying, Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. 12,000 from the tribe of Judah were sealed, 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 from the tribe of Gad, 12,000 from the tribe of Asher, 12,000 from the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 from the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 from the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 from the tribe of Levi, 12,000 from the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 from the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 from the tribe of Joseph, and 12,000 from the tribe of Benjamin were sealed. Let's talk about that. Is 144,000 a real number in the book? I mean, is this a literal number? No. Have we bumped into any numbers yet that are used literally and not metaphoric? In the book of Revelation, are we going to bump into any number, any literal number? No. It's not a literal book. It's prophecy, right? So that's our first problem with 144,000 being what our denominational friends consider it, right? What is this seal? What is being given to these people? If you put your seal on something, whose thing is that?
As a promise by God.
Right. If you have a seal, if you are a notary, right, and you put your notary on that, you're putting your authority and power behind it, right? Effectively, that document, no matter whose it is, it could be anything, right? But you've taken at least partial ownership of that if you've put your seal on it, right? So if your seal is on it, it's yours. Mm-hmm. Yes. So anytime we read about a seal being done, that seal being placed on something, especially as we read here, means it's theirs. If you see a seal of the IRS on an envelope, it means it's theirs and it's their material, and you probably don't want to read it. You're going to have to, but you don't want to, right? I mean, we understand. I mean, police cars, you see the seal of the city, the seal police on the police car. We understand that's the police departments. We see different seals on things. It's ownership. You're theirs. The saints are under a divine protection. They're being sealed, right? So we have these four angels at the four corners of the earth. The number 4 literal here? No, the earth is a sphere. Are there literally 4 corners to the earth? When we say the 4 corners of the earth, what are we talking about? Right, which is the whole thing, right? All of it. The four we say that still now. The 4 corners of the earth. It's everything. So they're holding back the winds from the 4 corners of the earth. Are these like nice, calm, gentle breezes?
I think of the storms, blustery,
And we read about storms in the Bible. It's turmoil and trial, persecution, right? They're holding that back from the earth until God's number has been sealed. So here, as we're reading about this cry from an altar as a promise of judgment, we have this interlude between the 6th and 7th seal. So before we open up and finish out the plan, before these judgments start to actually fall, we need to make sure that our people are marked, right? We need to know who are mine and who are not. It's a seal of protection. It's interesting, though, the power of God, right? Not even a leaf is allowed to be stirred on these trees until he has marked those who are his. Hold the winds. Don't harm the trees. Don't harm the ocean. Don't harm anything until I say so. The power of God.
So my interpretation is this is something that's already happened in the past. So this is the seal. What do you seal? You seal what's yours. So the Old Testament people who were saved by the covenant of Moses, the patriarchal covenant, since it's in the past, those people have already been sealed. And so I think this is a reference of a past completion.
If it's in the past and they're dead, where would they be?
Well, they're already sealed.
The book of Revelation does not differentiate between Jew, Gentile in the whole book. Okay? Well, let's talk about this. Right? So why then does he mention a number of 144,000 and then go through and mention these 12 tribes? if he's talking specifically about the 12 tribes of Israel, can anyone think of a problem here?
Yes, because Joseph was a tribe, and then his two. Yeah.
So we have some weird stuff going on with the names, right? In fact, some are mentioned at all. So if we're looking back to the Old Testament, those who were sealed previously, those who had come before, if we're thinking of Romans chapter 11, as I asked you to read over and review, right, those would be the roots. If we're thinking about that and making a differentiation, then what about the two tribes that are not mentioned here? That's right. Yes, I think it's much easier to look at it though as, because where have we been this whole time? As far as this vision goes, the doors open and John steps into heaven, right? This is now this is the first time we've really stepped back and looked at the earth again, right? So we're going back to earth and we're sealing those on earth. Who's this written to? Is it written to the ones that are already dead and gone, or is this written to the ones who are on earth? It's written to the ones on earth. So he's coming back to the earth and sealing those who are on the earth. I honestly don't have a reason for you that he went back and mentioned then 12. I can't find in any research why he would go back.
Mine comes from my idea that this is going back and showing the historical pattern throughout from creation. This is back to my cyclical idea that all these are patterns that go from creation to the time of Moses, Noah, Moses. This is just a cyclical thing. So my view is he's demonstrating the people of the old covenant and past have been sealed, and it's showing it as now the church age, if you will. Now there's an untold number of, I looked and there's an untold number from every nation, and that's kind of the future aspect of it, coming out of the Great Tribulation. That's fine.
So I don't have a good reason that he would mention specifically the Old Testament tribes here. Why he would then leave these out? I mean, there's tradition that holds that why they would hold out some of the tribes they did, and all this, but like I don't have a good answer, and I couldn't find a good answer of why he mentioned that. Most folks that I read just said that they don't have a good answer either. Whilst I would agree very much that there are parallels that we can draw from it too, I'll hesitate to say that this is, because this is an opening of a scroll that has been sealed. So if it's been sealed, whilst we can draw parallels, I would be careful to then go back and say this is a cyclical thing that he's talking about here. That pattern has repeated itself so many times, but as we're dealing with it here, I'd be hesitant to do that as well. Not that I have the right answer, not that I have, but just things to think about. So the literal number 144,000, it's the number 12 times itself, which is representative of God's covenant people, right? The 12 tribes. So those who have a covenant with God, and then 12 and 12 being the perfect number, 10 being a complete number, we get 144,000, or a multiple of 10, not 10. 12 times 12 times 10 is not 144,000, but it's a multiple of. So we combine the perfect numbers and the complete numbers, and we say all those sealed, those that have a covenant with God, the complete number of those who have a covenant with God. Didn't lose any. He knows them. He knows the hairs on our heads, right? And he sealed them all. And nothing is allowed to happen of this judgment that's promised until we know until all of those people are identified, okay? So personally, and from research that I could find, I think the strongest argument seems to simply reference the faithful on earth. We've transitioned, and we've looked at basically the audience he's writing to now. We've been looking in heaven this whole time. Those who are dead, those who have gone on before, they're under the altar, they're crying for vengeance, they're a multitude up worshiping in heaven, right? And then we have those on earth who are about to undergo this persecution. He comes down and he marks those on earth who are about to go through these promised tribulations, seals them. Then we go back up and he says, okay, right? So it's before these winds are loosed, before we begin to blow the trumpets, before the last seal is removed and the bowls of wrath are begun to pour out. We need to know who needs to be protected, who is ours. Let's mark our people. Dan and Ephraim were the tribes I was trying to think of, by the way. Tradition holds that Dan is actually where calf worship began, so that would be one thought if you're going to try to take the tribe thing literal. But I think it's more of just God's people, as indicative of Romans 11. Like I said, the tree and how Christ got here and how everyone has received salvation. And this is similar to Ezekiel chapter 9, verses 1 through 8, and we get this vision of destruction, the winds and everything. Further thoughts on the 144,000 being sealed? So we're going to say this are those with a covenant with God. Those who are on earth are sealed prior to these tribulations that are coming. Right? They are shown whose ownership they are. This is important because in a minute somebody else comes in and puts a mark on people, right? And this is just the first demonstration of being marked before we come in and we see the other mark. Because those with God's seal then could not receive Satan's seal here in a minute. But we're not there yet. After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels are standing around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures. And they fell to their faces before the throne, worshiping God, saying, Amen. Blessings and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, Who are those clothed in white robes, and from where have they come? I said to him, Sir, you know. And he said to me, These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they are before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Victory, right? I've sealed you on earth, you're mine. Now, there's a couple ways that we can look at this new multitude here. Is this that same group that were sealed after the tribulation has come, and they've passed through the tribulation? That's one. And I don't have a good answer for this, guys. I'm not real sure. So is it that multitude, or are we transitioning, which I think this one fits better. Are we transitioning? We looked at earth and we sealed the people who are about to undergo persecution and tribulation, right? And we've transitioned after this, so we've end of scene. Let's look back up into heaven. We go back up into heaven, the camera pans, and now we see this great multitude, those who have come before, those who have remained victorious, right? Those who have white robes, those who have been washed in the blood of Christ, because Christ has already been the sacrifice. He's up in heaven doing this job now. So those who were held back before, after they died, because the blood of Christ wasn't there, have now been washed. And now we have this great multitude of those who've gone before, those who were faithful through the covenant, those from Adam all the way through till then, this first century here. Those have been washed white. Now they've been given robes as victors, because now they are able to be there with him. Because the blood of bulls and goats was simply not enough, right? So I think that picture matches better. But like I said, I don't know. I don't have the answers for sure all the way on that part. Regardless, this is obviously the victorious people, those who have fought the good fight, who have won the race. They are triumphant. They are no longer in need of God's protection on earth, on the seal, because they're in heaven. They are directly with God in his presence, right? This is a scene of great encouragement, right? These people who are about to undergo persecution, this is the promised victory. If you just stay the course, this is what you'll get. You'll be in heaven. I will give you these things. They'll have their robes. We'll have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Verse 14. Perhaps these could be the souls that were under the altar that have been brought out. Contrasts Roman worship with God's glory and worship, right? Once again, there's no comparison. As we see another worship scene, as all this great multitude of people who have now been washed white in the blood of the Lamb, who are now victorious, standing in heaven, what are they doing? They're worshiping God. They're praising and singing God. Glory forever. Amen. So remember, the Romans were required to worship the emperor at least once a year, so you get your good boy certificate so you could go buy and trade and market and make a living, right? But the children of God don't serve him one day a year to get the good boy certificate. They serve him day and night. They bow down around the throne and sing praises to him day and night, always. Just continual praise to our Creator.
Scott, just thinking about a thought. As you see from the Old Testament to transition into heaven, the past, present, and the future preservation and the victory of God's people that we see throughout the book of Revelation, throughout the Bible. God is always in control of his people. So even the seal of those who would accept the seal, accept the plan of salvation, be covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, which is a sign of a seal for Christians to be identified. So the past, present, and future victory we should always be looking at in any generation, at any time. Even when the culmination of life is over, then we can have the rejoicing, I'm going to use that term, of what is ahead for us while we are here present. So I like the analogy that you're using that to look at the Old Testament, John looking up in heaven, looking back, telling me as I'm hearing you talk, I'm being preserved for my future when I do get there, when we do get there. So God is still in control. That's what we have to look at, his controlling power over whatever medium exists.
Thank you. And we're about to be able to contrast this love and this worship scene and this glory, this peace in heaven with, we're about to transition sharply about what's going to be on earth. And the contrast between earth and heaven here should not be missed, right? It also makes me think of the parable of the, what title have we given it? The master goes out and hires people at different times of the day and promises each one of them a day's pay. And the ones at the end are mad because they didn't get the same pay as those at the beginning, right? We use that a lot to talk about like ages of people, right? So like, oh, if you've only been a Christian a year, but if you die a Christian a year, or you've been a Christian 5 minutes, or if you've been a Christian 50 years, it doesn't matter, you get the same reward, right? But we can also apply that here to the faithful, right? So it doesn't matter what covenant you were under, as long as you were faithful, the blood of Christ has made it possible then to receive the same reward. Did you go through these weird trials and have to sacrifice animals because you're under the Mosaic law? Were you under the patriarchal law where you were actually talking directly to God, to the head of the household? What are you under? Are you under the blood of Christ? Are you under the Christian age? It doesn't matter what age you're under. The end result, because of Christ's blood that has washed these robes clean and washed his people clean, we all receive the same reward, right? It's all tying in together. There's no differentiation. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There's nothing. Everyone is God's people or not God's people in the book of Revelation. It's beautiful, beautiful to think that we can sit down in heaven. Whenever Judgment Day comes, we all get to heaven. We can sit down beside all these people we read about. They're real. They will be there. We can sit down and we can ask Abraham, what was it like when God was like, hey, man, let's go. Just take your family. Let's go. We can sit down and talk to these people because they have the same reward, or we're promised their same reward. We're about to read about the seventh seal being opened, and there's silence in heaven for half an hour. This seal is a transition. We have this glory and worship and majesty in heaven, and as we open the seventh seal, there's silence. And then after that silence, it's broken by trumpets. So we have this worship scene of majesty and peace, silence, and that silence is about to be split by the peal of trumpets. Let's see how far we get into that. Chapter 8 of Revelation, verse 1. When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Once again, not literal, just means that there was silence for a period of time, right? Then I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. We could not be further from the peace of heaven than we are in this now. Like I said, worship and praise and peace in heaven. Silence, utter silence that is split by the sounding of trumpets. The prayers of the saints as incense have gone up to God. They have been offered as a sacrifice. He sees them, he recognizes them, he pours out his wrath with the fire that he put on that altar. They put that fire into the bowl, and they pour the bowl out onto the earth, and just so begins God's wrath. Now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and those who were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. How many angels were there standing holding back the winds? 4. How many angels are about to blow trumpets and throw bowls of wrath down? 7 total. The first 4 are going to be performing the tasks, probably the same 4 that were standing on the 4 corners of the earth, waiting to give. And that's because they're waiting to give things like this, the fire down from heaven, the different turmoil and stuff. It's coming. He said it's coming. I've marked my people. I know who are mine. So that way when the other guy comes in and starts marking people, he knows to stay away from my people. He knows he has no power over those people. And I will know their marks because I have marked my people. It's like, how do you tell a counterfeit, right? You don't have to learn all the different types of ways that you can counterfeit something. As long as you know the real thing, then you can spot a difference and know that it's a counterfeit. So no matter how Satan tries to dress these other guys up, no matter what they proclaim, no matter how close their message is, God's put his seal, and he knows what his seal is. He can save his people.
Two words I just have to say in this context is these angels were not doing this out of their own.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever was happening, God was giving to them. So instruction had to come directly from God to get all this carried out.
Right. It's all under the authority. And that's what, whenever the angel comes with the seal, whose authority does it say it came from? It came with the seal of God. And it's the same thing whenever, what king is it we read about? In the Old Testament, read about a king letting folks borrow his ring and making laws for him. It may be Esther. Is it Esther? Or Xerxes allows, anyway. As long as the king's ring is on the stamp, it doesn't matter who actually wrote the law. It doesn't matter. If the king's ring stamps it, then it's law. The king doesn't have to stamp it. The king's ring has to stamp it. So they're coming with the authority and the power of God here. You're absolutely correct. Joseph and Pharaoh. Yeah, Joseph was given Pharaoh's ring to do stuff with, wasn't he? The second angel, verse 8, blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So the first trumpet was land. The second one is sea, right? A third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. And the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. I wanted to go ahead and put all these 4 angels blowing their trumpets together because it's a nice little package there. These first 4 angels, every time calamity is mentioned, it's mentioned upon what? The actual earth itself, right? There's no people here mentioned. It's the earth itself. The elements are being mentioned as being affected. Now this will affect the people, but we're not directly going against the people yet. So these are the woes upon nature. And each of these trumpets, when we have in the Bible, when we read about trumpets, what are trumpets doing? They're sounding. What is the peal of a trumpet? Pay attention. Why do I need you to pay attention? Because I'm about to announce something, some kind of warning. It could be in battle. Trumpets are used to move troops. It could be like we see the king roll out and the king's about to make an announcement, right? It's the same thing here. They're blowing these trumpets because there's about to be an announcement made. It's a warning. Hey, listen up, because if you don't, it's about to go down. And there's 7 trumpets that go through. So after the 7 trumpets are complete, the announcement is complete. It's a call, is what these trumpets are doing. So think of this as you study in preparation for next week, and as what we read, as we go into these trumpets, we have had the whole seal is open now. We have the whole scroll open. And now we have, let's execute the plan. And the first part of the plan is, this is your warning. It's like a shot across the bow, right? The warning shots are fired. Listen to me. If you think this stuff is bad, you just wait. If you don't listen to this call for repentance, just wait until the bowls of wrath are poured out. Just keep that in mind as you study forward. Thank you all so much for another great week.